The chandelier above the long walnut table burned too bright that night, as if the house itself knew something was wrong. 12 men sat around it. One woman stood. Roman Bellini did not raise his voice. He never needed to. He simply set the folder down in the center of the table, and the sound of paper against wood was louder than any gunshot in that room. $14 million, he said. Frozen out of the reserve account 2 hours ago. Executed under a compliance credential that belongs to you. Every eye in the room turned toward Serena Vale. She did not flinch. She stood at the head of the room in a deep emerald dress, her dark hair pinned back, her hands folded in front of her like a woman waiting for a verdict she already knew the outcome of. "I moved it," she said. The room went utterly silent. Even the old capos, men who had buried brothers and burned evidence and buried more brothers, went still. Dante Marchetti, the youngest and hungriest of the captains, was the first to break the silence. "She just admitted it," he said, standing so fast his chair scraped the marble floor. "In front of all of us. She just admitted to seizing family money." "I didn't seize it," Serena said calmly. "I quarantined it. There's a difference. And every man in this room signed off on the protocol that let me do it." "What protocol?" Dante snapped. "The fraud containment procedure Roman authorized 8 months ago," Serena said. "Any flagged threat to the reserve can be frozen into a compliance hold with 2 credentials, mine, as the family's financial auditor, and a standing authorization Roman signed in advance for exactly this kind of emergency. That's why his signature is on the release. He approved this contingency before either of us knew we'd ever need it." "That's a technicality," Dante said. "It's the rule you all voted to accept," Serena said, "back when none of you thought it would ever be used against one of your own." "I am the one asking the questions," Roman said quietly, and the room fell silent again. Because when Roman Bellini lowered his voice like that, men remembered why they feared him in the first place. He looked at his wife. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of watching her navigate this world with a composure that unsettled even him sometimes. "Serena," he said, "the money is frozen. My name is on the authorization that let you freeze it. I need to know why right now, or I need to know it's a mistake so I can fix it before this table decides something I can't undo." "It's not a mistake," she said, "and it's not betrayal. But I can't tell you the full reason yet. I need 90 minutes. Vittorio Conti, seated at Roman's right hand, leaned forward. He was an old man with silver hair and a face carved from 6 decades of loyalty. He was the closest thing to a father Roman had left since his own father was shot in a warehouse 22 years ago, bleeding out in Vittorio's arms, while a 9-year-old Roman watched from a doorway. Roman trusted no one the way he trusted Vittorio. "Roman," Vittorio said gently, like a man trying to spare his godson pain. "A protocol is not a blank check. Whatever loyalty you feel, you cannot let a personal credential lock this family's money away for an hour and a half with no explanation." "I used the credential exactly the way it was designed to be used," Serena said, turning to him. "I used to catch people who abused systems like this one for a living, Vittorio, before I ever married into this family. I know precisely what the rules allow. 90 minutes is well inside the compliance window this table approved." Something flickered behind Vittorio's eyes. It was there and gone so fast that only a woman trained to read faces for a living would have caught it. Serena caught it. She filed it away and said nothing. 90 minutes, Roman said finally. "Clock starts now." Dante threw up his hands. "Roman, sit down," Roman said, and Dante sat. Serena did not run from the room. She walked unhurried past 12 men who were already deciding, in their private thoughts, that she was as good as dead if this went wrong. She walked past her husband last. He caught her wrist gently, just for a moment. "Give me a reason to believe you," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "I already did," she said. "I told you the truth. I just haven't told you all of it." Then she was gone, heels echoing down the marble hallway. 3 weeks earlier, Serena had been sitting in the study with a laptop, doing what she always did after the household went to sleep. Running the family's financial records the way she used to run audits at her old compliance firm, before Roman Bellini walked into her office 5 years ago, wanting to know why his accounts kept flagging for suspicious activity, and left with far more than an explanation. She had noticed it building slowly, not all at once. Dozens of small refund transactions, spread across weeks, clustered just under the review threshold. $40 here, $62 there. Never quite enough to trigger an automatic flag, but repeating in a rhythm that no ordinary billing error ever produced. Someone was testing exactly where the family's fraud detection stopped looking. It took her 9 days of quiet cross-referencing to be sure it wasn't noise. Once she was sure, she built a private shadow ledger, tracking every transaction that matched the pattern against the small handful of people who actually held the executive credentials required to authorize transfers at that level. The only 4 people in the family with active override tokens on the financial servers: Roman, herself, Dante, who handled the northern accounts, and Vittorio, who had handled the family's finances since before Roman was born. She did not want it to be Vittorio. But 2 nights before the family council, she found the transaction that changed everything. A routing chain that ended, after hours of tracing through obfuscation, clearly built by someone who understood forensic accounting as well as she did, at a clearing deadline. An external account, tied to a buyer she didn't yet have a name for, was scheduled to receive a transfer from the reserve within 72 hours. Once that window closed, the money would be gone through 6 more layers, and no shadow ledger in the world would ever pull it back. She had 2 choices: report it immediately and watch whoever was behind it destroy the trail the moment they realized they'd been found, which they would within minutes, given how close they clearly were to the entire operation, or force the deadline to break early. She chose the second. She quarantined the $14 million using the exact protocol the family had already approved for emergencies, freezing it out of reach of the clearing window that was about to open, not to hide it, to collapse the timeline the thief had built his plan around. Because a man who has spent weeks quietly preparing to move money through a closing window does not wait patiently when that window slams shut without warning. He panics, and panicking men reach for whatever tool is fastest, not whatever tool is safest. She knew the family would suspect her. She had built her plan around that certainty. Better that they suspect her, a woman they already resented for marrying into power she hadn't been born into, than suspect the man who had raised their boss like a son. She needed the 90 minutes to finish tracing the buyer's identity and the final credential used to authorize the test transactions, the one piece that would prove, beyond any denial, exactly whose token had built the trap she'd just sprung early. Back in the study, with the council waiting downstairs and the clock already running, Serena opened her laptop and got to work. The first 18 minutes went smoothly. Then her screen went dark. Not a crash. A remote lockout, executed through an override token, one of only 4 in existence. Someone inside that council room had just realized what she was doing and moved to stop her. There was a knock at the study door. Marco, one of the young soldiers assigned to household security, someone Serena had always trusted, someone who had driven her to doctor's appointments and carried her groceries and called her Mrs. Bellini with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Bellini," he said. "Mr. Conti asked me to check on you, make sure you're comfortable while you work." It was such a small, ordinary sentence. But Serena had spent 6 years reading people who lied for a living, and something in the careful blankness of his face told her the truth before her mind caught up to it. "I'm fine," she said, keeping her voice light. "Tell Mr. Conti I appreciate his concern." Marco lingered in the doorway a beat too long before he left. Serena closed the laptop and sat very still. She had built her entire plan assuming the thief didn't yet know she'd found him. That assumption had just collapsed. Only 4 override tokens existed. Roman was downstairs, visibly furious, with no reason to sabotage his own trap. Dante had motive to want her discredited, but his token hadn't touched the server logs that hour. She'd checked that days ago out of habit, and dismissed him then. That left one name she didn't want to say out loud, even to herself. She thought of the one thing she still had, the physical drive. Every night for 3 weeks, out of an old habit from her compliance days. Always keep a copy no system can delete. She had backed up her shadow ledger onto an encrypted drive hidden inside a hollowed paperback on the highest shelf of the study, a book Roman had bought her on their honeymoon that no one had touched in 5 years. She retrieved it with hands that did not shake, though her pulse was roaring in her ears. The data was 2 days old. It showed the pattern clearly, but not the final confirmed identity behind the lockout. That piece existed only on the live server she'd just lost. She needed another way in, and she needed it without alerting whoever was watching. She thought of Dante. 4 days earlier, she had genuinely suspected him. His accounts overlapped several of the test transactions. He'd been meeting quietly with men from a rival family in Newark. He'd started wearing an expensive new watch to council meetings like a small declaration of arrival. She had followed that thread hard, right up until she found the truth behind it. The Newark meetings were about protecting his sister, who had married outside the family's blessing and was being threatened by her husband's people. The watch was a peace offering from that same brother-in-law, not proceeds of theft. Dante was reckless and openly contemptuous of her in every room they shared. But he wasn't the thief. She had confirmed it, quietly, 3 days before the council, and moved on. Now she needed something from him, and she knew better than to ask for trust she hadn't earned. She sent him one file before she called. A single transaction, routed through his northern account without his authorization, time-stamped the week before, the earliest test transaction she'd found. Proof he'd been used, not just suspected. Then she called. "Someone ran a transaction through your account without you signing off on it," she said when he picked up. "I can show you exactly which one. In exchange, I need read-only access to the disaster recovery mirror on the Northern Relay, the one that can't move money. Only show me what already happened." There was a long pause while he checked the file. "That's my account," Dante said slowly. "I never authorized that. I know. Whoever's behind this used you as cover the same way they're trying to use me as the scapegoat." Another pause. 30 minutes, Dante said. "And you tell Roman whatever happens tonight, that I gave this to you before I knew how it would end. Deal?" Through the read-only mirror, an immutable log that recorded every server action but couldn't authorize a single transfer, Serena rebuilt her view of the transaction history. 32 minutes left on the council's clock. She traced the final shell account through 3 more layers of obfuscation, each one clearly built by someone who had learned forensic evasion from watching her work for years, without her ever suspecting she was training her own opponent. At the 20-minute mark, she found the buyer's name behind the external clearing account, a shipping conglomerate with no public ties to any family she recognized, clean enough to be almost invisible. And beside it, in the immutable log the mirror had preserved, a device certificate, the same certificate that had executed her lockout 18 minutes into the investigation, registered under a hardware key issued 11 years ago to a name Vittorio Salvatore Conti had used before he ever set foot in America, a name buried so deep that only someone who knew exactly where to look could have surfaced it. 2 independent threads, the credential that built the trap, the credential that tried to stop her from finding it, both led to the same registration. She sat back from the screen, and for the first time that night, her composure cracked, just slightly, just for a breath, not from fear, but from grief on Roman's behalf for what she was about to hand him. She thought about softening it, finding a private way to tell him first. But she knew a private reveal would let Vittorio deny everything and retreat to try again in a form she might not catch a second time. It had to be public. It had to be undeniable. At the 88-minute mark, Serena Vale walked back into the council room carrying nothing but a slim tablet and the quiet, terrible calm of a woman who has just found the answer to a question she wished she'd never had to ask. Roman stood the moment she entered. Dante caught her eye and gave the smallest nod. 90 minutes, Vittorio said, checking his watch with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You're almost late, my dear." "I'm exactly on time," Serena said. She set the tablet on the table and turned it so every man in the room could see the screen. 9 days ago, I found a pattern of test transactions probing our fraud thresholds, she began. Classic groundwork for moving a large sum through a closing clearing window before anyone noticed. 3 nights ago, I confirmed the window would open within 72 hours. I quarantined the reserve to force that window shut early. Because a man who spent weeks building a deadline doesn't sit still when the deadline disappears without warning. "And did he move?" Roman asked, his voice carefully even, though Serena could see the tension in his jaw. 18 minutes into my investigation, someone with an executive override token locked me out of the servers, Serena said. "Only 4 of those tokens exist in this family. I confirmed mine wasn't used. Yours was downstairs the entire time, in this room, in front of 12 witnesses. Dante's hasn't touched the Northern Relay in 9 days. I checked that 4 days ago when I still thought he was my suspect, and I was wrong about him." She tapped the tablet. The screen filled the wall behind her with a chain of accounts, dates, and a single hardware credential, laid out with the brutal clarity of a woman who had spent years making the invisible visible. "That leaves 1 token, the same one that authorized every test transaction over the last 2 months. The same one that locked me out 18 minutes into tonight's investigation. Registered to a hardware key issued under this name." The final line on the screen read a name from a passport issued in Palermo 31 years ago. Vittorio Salvatore Conti. The room did not gasp. Men like these did not gasp. but the silence that followed was heavier than any sound could have been. Roman looked at the screen, then at Vittorio, then back at the screen, as if some part of him hoped the letters would rearrange themselves into any other name in the world. "Roman," Vittorio said, and his voice, for the first time in 22 years, wavered. "Those transactions were contingency reserves. I've run this family's money since before you could count it. I move funds through legacy accounts when it serves the family. This is not what she's making it look like. Contingency reserves don't have a buyer waiting on a clearing deadline," Serena said. "And contingency reserves don't need a hidden name from before you were a made man. You cannot possibly believe a spreadsheet over the man who raised you," Vittorio said, turning to Roman, his voice rising now. "It's not a spreadsheet," Roman said quietly. "It's a token only you hold, on a transaction only you could authorize, tracing to a name only you would think to use." "Why that name, Vittorio? Answer that, and I'll listen to everything else." The old man was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, the mask finally dropped. 22 years, he said, and something cold slid into his voice, the resentment of a lifetime finally surfacing. "I held this family together with my bare hands after your father died, while you were still learning to tie your shoes. I built what you inherited, and what did I get for it? A seat at the table, while a woman who isn't even blood sits above men who bled for this family for decades." "So you decided to take what you thought you were owed," Roman said. "I decided to take what should have been mine before some outsider with a laptop decided she understood loyalty better than I do," Vittorio said. He looked at Serena. "You should have stayed out of accounts that weren't yours to touch." "They were exactly mine to touch," Serena said, unflinching. "I'm his wife, and I hold the credential this family gave me. This family's survival is my business, whether you respect that or not." Dante stood then, slow and deliberate, and for the first time in 3 years looked at Serena with something other than contempt. "She just saved this family $14 million, he said. "I think an apology is owed, and it isn't to him." A murmur moved around the table, not unanimous agreement, not yet. The oldest capo at the far end kept his hands flat on the table, his face unreadable, a man who had trusted Vittorio longer than most of them had been alive. But 2 of the younger captains nodded slowly, and Dante's words hung in the air long enough to matter. Roman did not speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was the coldest anyone in that room had ever heard it. "Take him," he said to the 2 soldiers by the door. Vittorio did not resist. He simply looked at Roman one last time, something almost like regret flickering across his face. "I loved you like a son," he said. "I know," Roman said. "That's why this will never stop hurting. It doesn't change what you did. They let him out. What became of him afterward was never discussed at that table again." The room stayed silent for a long moment, the weight of 2 decades of loyalty unraveling in the space of 90 minutes. Roman turned to Serena. In front of every man at that table, he crossed the room and took her face in both hands. "I want to give you his seat," he said. "Financial authority over the entire family, effective tonight." Serena studied him for a long moment. Around the table the men waited. "No," she said. Roman blinked. "No? I don't want a seat you hand me because you feel guilty for doubting me tonight," she said. "I want formal authority over this family's financial operations recognized on my own qualifications. The same way every man at this table holds his position. My signature carries the same weight as theirs on asset decisions. I audit every account without asking permission first. And no credential in this family locks me out again, not even yours." "That's not a gift," Roman said slowly, something that might have been pride moving behind his eyes. "That's a demand," he said. "It is." He turned to the table, all in favor. Dante's hand went up first. 2 of the younger captains followed. The old capo at the far end hesitated, looked once at the empty chair where Vittorio had sat for 20 years, and then raised his hand slowly. The way men agree to something they know is right before they've finished grieving what it cost. One by one, the rest followed. Serena did not smile in triumph. She simply nodded once. The way she used to nod at a difficult audit finally closed. Later, the house had gone quiet, and Roman found her in the study where it had all started. "You could have told me the night you found it," he said, "and you would have confronted him on instinct before I had proof strong enough to survive him denying it," she said. "He would have wiped the trail in an hour." 90 minutes, Roman said. "I have never been more afraid in my life. Afraid I was guilty, afraid you weren't, and that I'd made you wait too long to prove it." Serena took his hand. "You gave me the 90 minutes the moment I asked. That's not a small thing. Most men in your position would have needed proof first. You gave trust first. I fell in love with you in an office that smelled like burnt coffee, Roman said, watching you go through my accounts like you were defusing a bomb one line at a time. I fell in love with a man who let me finish my sentences, Serena said. In this business, that apparently makes you a revolutionary. He laughed low and real, the first easy sound he'd made all night. They'll test you, he said. Not all of them tonight. But eventually, let them, Serena said. I've spent my whole life being underestimated by men who thought quiet manners meant I wasn't paying attention. I've built a career out of being the person no one saw coming. Roman studied her, the woman he had married for reasons he was only now able to name out loud. I don't just love you, he said. I trust you with everything I have left. That's the only kind of love that survives in a house like this one, she said. Not protection dressed up as control. Trust, tested and proven over and over for as long as it takes. He kissed her, slow and unhurried, the way a man kisses a woman he has finally completely stopped underestimating. Welcome to the table, he murmured. Officially. I was always at the table, Serena said. You just gave the rest of them permission to see it. She had not been given a seat. She had made herself impossible to remove from one.